All right, here we have a 2019 Toyota Tundra. Problem, steering sticks as you turn, so you feel a little catch, then it loosens back up, and then it goes back to normal. Problem is the steering shaft knuckle gets rusted out. So we're going to lift this up, take a look at it, and see about replacing that shaft. We'll get the vehicle up in the air and take the wheel off and take a look at what we got in there. So the steering shaft comes down from the steering wheel and goes down to the rack and pinion down here connection. The joint is actually behind this frame section. Makes it hard to see that joint. As you can see, there's a bolt right up on top. That bolt will need to be loosened, and then that joint pried apart to be able to push out that intermediate shaft there, the steering shaft. There's another bolt on the bottom side. If you look right up under here, you can see it. Just got to move my camera way in there. You can kind of see there's that bolt. You may have to turn the shaft until that bolt is accessible. It makes it very difficult to get to for the most part. You got to get some extensions in there. I'll show you that in a bit. Right now I'm going to turn my steering wheel. Now, once you disconnect this shaft, you need to make sure your steering wheel doesn't rotate too much or you could break stuff. Usually strap it down with a bungee or something. And then at the end, you got to make sure it lines up. Now, as you can see, this shaft looks new because I've already installed it, and I thought about doing this video after. We had to turn the shaft till we found the bolt head. Next thing we're going to do is get a wrench up on that bolt head with a couple extensions and start loosening that bolt up so we can remove the shaft. Okay, so now I've got the ratchet up in there, a couple extensions, that 12mm socket on that nut. Got a little bit of a flexible head ratchet here just to kind of help things move around. It's pretty tight in here. And then I just loosen it up and then work that bolt out. Alright, so now I've moved to beneath the truck, and underneath this flap, if you look up past the shaft, if I can get my flashlight working right, you can see that U-joint. You can see that connector up in there. Like I said, I've already kind of got the new one in. I'll show you the old one later on in the video that we pulled out. But you got to get that lined up and pushed down on the shaft. What I found to be effective was working from the bottom down here, reaching my hand up underneath to work the shaft into place. If my cameraman can show you up inside here where I'm pushing that down into place on that shaft up in there. And I worked it both ways. I did the same thing with the top, where I worked it up onto that shaft and got it, that bolt tightened onto there. But once it's pushed down and back in place, it'll sit between two grooved sections, and then the bolt will go back in place. As you can tell, to get to that bolt, I'm going to have to rotate the steering wheel again. While you're disconnecting and installing the shaft, make sure not to rotate the steering wheels or wheels, or else you'll have to realign everything, and in my case, you might have to do it anyways. But either way, you want to check that before you finalize this job. Okay. So we've worked the shaft, rotated it back around so we can get back into that shaft bolt location. Make sure you're getting the non-threaded end to run that bolt in. Let me see if I can get a better camera angle in here, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So one end of that shaft has threads, the other one does not. You want the bolt's got to slide through the non-threaded section and then catch those threads and tighten up to torque specs. All right, now to get after it. Let me get that bolt. I put it on the end of the extensions and do my best to work in. Yep, we did have to clean up this bolt to try to get it as good as we could before we worked it back in. There we go. I got lucky. Went right in. And then just going to get started by hand. Eventually I'll swap over to the ratchets here. Okay. Just to give you a view, let me just get a light in here and move that brake line up out of the way. So that's what we're dealing with. Yeah, there's a lot of things to try to get worked into this decently tight spot, but that's what we're dealing with for the wrenches. And pull that camera out and put the ratchet on and see what we can do putting that back in place here. Okay, let's pull that camera right back a little. Let's stick my arm back in here. Try to get a good angle on this, not to mess up my threads. So I mentioned that the problem I was experiencing with the truck was stiff turning. As I would go to turn it, it would almost feel like it was stopping or not allowing it to turn. And then once you got past a certain point, it would actually free up and turn again. It was somewhat intermittent, happening once in a while more than others. This has actually happened to me on a former Tundra, so I kind of thought I knew what the problem was. So this would probably apply to Tundras ranging from roughly 2017 through 2020. This is a 2019, maybe even 21. I know the former generation, the 2008 through the 16-17 time frame, also had this same setup. And this is what we're looking at for a steering shaft. What happens is this piece right here gets very rusted, and this U-joint stops being a U-joint. As you can see, it won't move. You've really got to put effort to it. Now this was out in the weather for a couple days, but it looked pretty similar when I pulled it out of the truck. This often impacts trucks up in northern climates. I plow snow with this truck, and it probably sees its fair share of salty roads. So that's probably a big problem why this rusted out and froze up like it did. It's not a horrible job. It will take some time and a few tools at least, and it's awful cramped in there. That's one of the biggest items, and you just got to be careful not to let that steering wheel turn and get misaligned. If it does, you'll just have to spend a little more time lining everything back up, and you don't want that steering wheel freewheeling either. That can mess up the internals to the steering wheel. So, all right, I hope this helps someone else. Couldn't find a video online, so I figured I would do something real short just to help anyone who was wondering what was going on. Thanks.